With the launch of the Nintendo GameCube came excitement of knowing we would get a wrestling title in due time. Remember, Nintendo is responsible for hosting WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy, so how will WrestleMania 18 stack up? The game kicks off with a little intro put together with footage from the pay-per-view of the same name that year. It's a bit on the short side and the video quality is poor, but we get the point. Now, at first glance, the character selection screen seems to be pretty complete, but after looking it over for a minute, you'll start to notice a lot of wrestlers missing from the game. I mean, come on. No Eddie Guerrero, but they managed to include Lance Storm? And there's also no Billy Gunn, no Hollies, Perry Saturn, Goldust, X-Pac. Okay, I know. X-Pac sucks, but he's one of my all-time favorites. At least we got the tag team duo of Scotty 2 Hotty and Albert. You know what though, I really can't complain because the NWO is in the game. And until 2K14 released last year, this was the last game to feature my all-time favorite wrestler, Scott Hall. Oh, and there's 2 different attires for every superstar, which is fantastic. One of the most underrated features in a wrestling title is multiple attires. This needs to be in every game. The entrances are a bit dodgy looking and the animations are a bit twitchy. Some of the wrestlers just look absolutely dead making their way to the ring. The music sounds good though, and the pyro effects actually sound a little bit better than some of the other wrestling games from the time. And speaking of music, why no NWO theme? I hate these damn copyright laws. So apparently the WWE lost the rights to the theme right around the time of the game's development. So instead we get some generic rock music. Now, surprisingly, it does fit the NWO attitude, but it's just not the same. The game lacks entrance announcers, and that's probably due to the limited space on the little GameCube discs. Overall, not a bad attempt. WrestleMania 18 isn't exactly a pretty looking game. The wrestlers have oddly shaped bodies and most of them have generic looking faces that don't really resemble the real thing. Along with this comes poorly put together animations, which only adds to the bad presentation. I will say though that the ring and stage areas do look nice and even the crowd isn't too bad for a bunch of cardboard cutouts. There's a fair selection of arenas in the game. As expected, there's Raw and SmackDown, along with the classic Ovaltron SmackDown stage. And you also get WrestleMania 18, 17, and a few other pay-per-views. Ringside tables can be broken. Okay. Like I said, ringside tables... Yeah, you can break the tables. Sometimes. Which is always a plus in my book. And you can wrestle on the stage, which is cool, but there aren't any backstage areas, and that in my mind is taking a step backwards. The gameplay feels a little bit more like the N64 titles. And by that I mean it feels more like those titles than it does a SmackDown game. The grappling and attack buttons are set up in a similar fashion. Examples: strong strikes can be performed while holding the attack button, as weak strikes are performed from quickly tapping the button. One thing I don't like about the button layout is the combinations that are required for certain actions. If you want to Irish whip your opponent, you have to press A and Y together. It's not a deal breaker, it just feels a bit weird with the way the GameCube controller is set up. And speaking of button combos, finishers are performed by pressing A and B together after one is stored. You'll gain a finisher after filling the special meter by performing moves and taunting. It's pretty standard protocol by this point in the wrestling game series. One thing that these games are known for, love it or hate it, is the fact that you're able to be attacked no matter what your player is doing. By that I mean you could be in the middle of setting up a pedigree and somebody comes by and smashes you in the head. It can be frustrating, but I feel it adds a little bit of realism. I mean, why shouldn't I be able to save my tag team partner if he's about to get jackknifed? Because he's stuck in an animation, he's off limits? Not in this game. But where that can get frustrating is when you're setting up a move and somebody fighting next to you simply performs a suplex or something and it manages to land on you, and this will cause everybody involved to go crashing to the ground. Overall, I'd say the gameplay is decent, but there was plenty of room for improvement here. The in-game music is pretty generic and forgettable. Some of the menu music though is decent, especially the Create a Wrestler mode music. Speaking of Create a Wrestler, the Create a Wrestler mode in WrestleMania 18 is decent at best. I mean, I like the fact, though, that they're preloaded faces, tattoos, and attires to make some of the superstars that didn't make the final roster. So, if I want to make DDP, I can easily do so, along with his entrance moves. Other than that, it doesn't offer much for my liking. It feels a bit bare. There isn't much offered as far as career mode either. There is a Path of Champions, which lets you select a belt to compete for and puts you in a series of matches until you get the title shot. This mode is how you unlock secret wrestlers, though there aren't many that are worth a damn. I mean, they wasted a roster spot on Stephanie. Other exhibition modes include mostly everything you saw on TV at the time. Hardcore matches like any other match, but you start the bout with the ring loaded with weapons. Everything from trash cans to sledgehammers. This is where those button combos come into play again. To pick something up, it's A and X, which only seems to work about 80% of the time. Sometimes I get the picking up animation, but if not aimed properly, you'll come up with nothing. There's a cage match, and yeah, it's a cage match. Beat up your opponent, climb out, win. It's alright, I guess. Nothing special. I find the opponent never really stays down long enough. The Hell in a Cell was pulled off well, and what would a Hell in a Cell be without being able to bust out of the cell, climb to the top, and powerbomb your opponent through the center down into the ring? Only problem is getting your opponent to actually climb the cell. The stubborn AI will often just stand down at the bottom, staring up at you like a moron. Ladder match is cool, but the ladder gets knocked over way too often. And regardless, it's still way too easy to win, as the AI does not really respond quick enough to your climbing attempts. Got it. The table match is entertaining, but it seems every time I set up at a table, an opponent takes it down. A little bit frustrating, but nevertheless a must-have match type. TLC was huge at this time, and since we have ladder matches and table matches already in the game, why not this? Just like the ladder match though, this is won a little too easily thanks to lazy AI. And no wrestling game is complete without the Royal Rumble, one of my absolute favorite multiplayer modes for these games for many years. Now, at this point in gaming, that was kind of a standard for these match types. Irish whip your opponent near the ropes, battle them on the apron until they hit the floor. There's nothing special that stands out here in this mode, but I'm glad there's no load times between entrances. I wasn't really a big fan of this game, though I did prefer it over Raw on the Xbox. It didn't stand a chance against the SmackDown games that were being made at the time, but it did feature the NWO, Rockhouse theme or not. It lacked a lot of stuff, but it was the first game in the series and they had to start somewhere. It goes for really cheap, and honestly it's not a bad pickup for the price, as long as you're a wrestling fan, that is. If not, you'll probably hate it.